Central bank intervention has kept the markets alive, barely, and paying close attention we can see where the money has gone. I assure you there is no QE money in my pockets, that's for sure. So where did it go exactly? You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today we are going to look at quantitative easing, we're going to look at China, and so much more. Let's begin. This article is out of the Wall Street Journal. The stock market just ended a stretch of calm that by one measure was last seen more than 50 years ago. The S&P 500 sank 0.6%, ending a streak of 50 consecutive days without a daily decline of 0.5% or more. That's the longest by that measure since 1965. You can see that the volatility has gone to levels it has never been before. Despite the tensions that are going on today, despite all the potential risk and failure, you see the volatility being extremely low. And as a result, there has been nothing to worry about with stocks. In general, they've been just rising and rising and rising. And this has given more investors the incentive to hop in. And that is unfortunate because a lot of them are unsophisticated. They've been putting into mutual funds and ETFs and other investments, and it's quite unfortunate that they will all have to suffer the consequences. So this article gets into the issues that we are experiencing today. However, it tries to make it seem that, look, everything is going to be okay. And it's just not the case when you look at the statistics, when you look at the level of preparation that people have today. They are not ready for what's coming. You can see this here where it has gone from going back quite some time, not hitting even the smallest fraction of a decline in this particular day. And 0.6% is really nothing compared to the events that we've seen in history, but this makes history in a way. That's truly absurd to me. Now, where has that inflation gone? Well, looking at the official US CPI, urban consumers, we're all starting here on the left-hand side. This is going back from 2014. And you follow this red line, and it ends off at 3.8, but as far as I'm concerned, it's basically flat. That's not the real inflation numbers, surely, but even if it were to end up a bit higher, 2 times, maybe even 3 times if you want to say, but let's say 2 times, it's still, looking at it like this, it's almost to make it seem like that's the average person. And then when you factor in the NASDAQ over the years, when you factor in the G3 central bank balance sheet, when you factor in everything, even this, the fine wine index, even that has risen. And the average individual, their wages, they haven't risen. In fact, in real terms, they've declined. And that's troublesome. But nobody wants to talk about that. And that's strange to me. It's really strange to me. All right. China industrial production. I've covered this recently, but you can see where it has gone just in a short period of time. After the financial crisis, or I should say before the financial crisis, things were booming, everything's doing well. You can see industrial production is rising. You saw the boom in commodities, and it looked like they were an unstoppable machine that would just keep going and going. And then the financial crisis hit, and we took a dip. We took a dip in every category. Everything seemed to decline at that time. But of course, there was some reflation. But ever since then, it seems to be declining. There are many reasons for this. I believe that the general economy globally is not doing well. That's the way I look at it. And that's the sort of synopsis. That's looking at it from that bird's eye view. It just doesn't seem like it's doing well, as far as I'm concerned. Now, what they're trying to note here is China exports. The exports, when you look at other countries, whatever that might be, let's take this in general terms. For example, if Chile has copper, they will have an issue if China no longer requires that as much copper. Well, they're not going to do well as a result because they're a major exporter. Look at oil in Canada. Oil price comes down, the real estate and the businesses surrounding those oil-based areas are heavily influenced around oil. The real estate, the businesses, they've done poorly. They've done really bad. In fact, you see a lot of delinquencies. You could see people having to sell off their homes for much, much less than what they bought them for. Up in this boom, their jobs are gone. And you'll see that existing in different countries. And so to some degree, you'll see that here in China. If the rest of the world isn't doing well, or these particular commodities or things that they have to sell become too expensive or become something that nobody wants anymore, you have a little problem with your exports. That's just the way it is. ABS commercial paper outstanding. Oh, how I love it. Right here. The week of August 8th, 2007. We've done quite a bit of work trying to identify, by the way, this is the Open Market Desk Chief Bill Dudley, okay? They want to identify some of the funding questions around Bear Stearns countrywide and some of the commercial paper programs. There is some strain, but so far it looks as though nothing is really imminent in those areas. And then we know what happened. It's really a shame that people believe these bankers, these politicians. How do you get away with it? How do you get away with lying every single chance you get? And people still believe it. Like lemmings walking off a cliff, like sheep being herded like cattle to the slaughter. All right. Foreign holdings change in U.S. corporate stocks. I thought this was pretty interesting because it is at a level now that it hasn't been for, let's say, a year or so. And prior to that was quite some time ago, right around the financial crisis era. Foreign holdings change, right? So I believe to some degree that if the Federal Reserve isn't printing, and I've said this before, if the Federal Reserve isn't printing, somebody else has to. So we have this influx of money coming from overseas, looking for a place to hide, and U.S. corporate stocks seems like the place to be. And that can make these stocks rise and rise. If the Federal Reserve starts to pull back on its balance sheet, as long as the ECB, the Bank of Japan, the Bank of Norway, and the Swiss National Bank and others, they print money and they send it towards the U.S., stocks can continue to rise. It's just the way it is. It's not rising on fundamentals, it's rising on central bank intervention. And I want to finish with this. I really like this quote. If you've ever heard it before, it's called the Streetlight Effect. A policeman sees a drunk man searching for something under a streetlight and asks what the drunk has lost. He said he'd lost his keys, and they both look under the streetlight together. After a few minutes, the policeman asks if he is sure he lost them here. Then the drunk replies no, and that he lost them in the park. The policeman asks why he is searching here, and the drunk replies, "This is where the light is." And I just laughed at it. And it goes to show you what people do when they analyze things. This is referencing that chart previous where I showed you the CPI, how if we're looking at the inflation rates and we see the CPI, we're not going to see inflation, especially when we use core inflation. It's just a joke. And you compare that to, a painting. If you saw that recently, a painting selling for nearly $500 million. I mean, that's where the inflation is going. You can see that inflation is going towards FANG stocks. That's for sure. You can see it going towards certain luxury items. Definitely. But the average person, no. They're not feeling it. They're not getting the bonus. They're not getting that pay increase. They're not getting the QE in their mailbox, that's for sure. The Streetlight Effect. I thought it was interesting. I wanted to leave with it today. Think about how this can apply to other things as well. That's all for this video. If you found it informative, please give me a thumbs up. Last but not least, if you found the video informative, I know you will find my books, The Money GPS, and my newer release, Global Economic Collapse, even more informative. You can flip through these books. There's links in the description below, which will take you over to Amazon, where you can flip through the books for yourself to see if you like them. Take care.